You have to come in the front, more in the front. There's just a small group.
We need chairs.
Bring chairs.
Oh yeah, yeah, come in.
Bring the
Yeah,
chairs in.
just push the cushions back. Just leave one row in the front.
Good.
That's what you want. The you can sit down.
Oops, I'm going to pull this out from under you. Did you want to sit on the floor?
Yeah, but I'm going to wait to see.
Do you want to sit here? Or up in the front?
I'm not knowing.
No, sit in the front.
There's one where the other cushions are.
Yeah, over there.
Do that right. Do that.
I know. You want me to sit there? Oh, I think it's these lot taller than me. Can you borrow it back a little bit? Instead of being so tight on me.
Yeah, I'll wait till.
Yeah.
I did a little
What's going to
bit.
happen, you're probably going to end up moving.
Yeah.
I don't mean to
No, I think it's just.
direct you.
I thought I did. But I don't know how much.
See, Damchoe, you messed it all up. We had it all set up here over there, and we moved it, we got to move the camera.
Oh, sorry about that.
Beautiful, that's perfect.
Try to,
Perfect.
It's fine.
because I'm the right height, I can pop it like
Perfect.
back in. And I put my
How does
foot
makeup?
in
Is
the
it
angle.
makeup on?
Like that.
I need some makeup on it.
Yeah, over me, but like go back a little bit so that way your feet are-
Hello, everybody. How are you?
Hi.
Good. Okay. All right. I think we have some new people, so I'm just going to introduce myself first, and then we can all introduce each other. Wow. Do we need to speak? Okay. So my name is Damchoe, and I'm from Nepal. I came from Nepal, but I'm here now. So I've been studying Buddhism for almost all my life, but I'm still studying, still don't know anything. Too much to learn about, so still learning and trying to practice a little bit as much as I can. And so that's about me. Go ahead.
My name's Walter.
My name is Cheryl.
Cheryl. And where are you from, Cheryl?
I'm from here now. I'm originally from New York.
From
but
New York.
I moved to Boston in '95.
Okay.
I think I'm an official transplant.
Okay.
My name is April.
April.
I've been coming here almost 4 years, talking in classes.
Nice. So we're going to test the memory there. Okay?
Oh, okay.
So, Walter, Cheryl. What was it?
Are you testing our memory or your memory?
My memory. No, I didn't. I have no right to test your memory.
We recorded by you.
That's the way to do it, review it every time you use it.
That's right, yeah. Okay.
I'm Mary. I currently reside in Concord, and I've been coming to the center on and off for the past year and a half.
Mary.
I'm Barbara.
Mm-hmm.
I'm Karen.
Karen.
I'm Chris. I live in Somerville, and I've also been coming to the center for about a year and a half.
Yeah. Okay. And she's she's Wendy. And almost everybody knows her, so she doesn't have to introduce herself. All right. So we're here to discuss about Buddhism, as you know, right? Of course, this is a Buddhist center, so obviously we're going to discuss about Buddhism, right? So basically, we're just going to, discuss. I'm not here to teach, and I don't know if you will learn anything, but we're going to have a discussion about Buddhism. So mostly it's going to be question answer. So you ask question, and I will try my best to answer. If I don't know, I will say I don't know, and if any of you know, then you can answer also. So that's what it's going to be, just discussion. Okay. Start with you, Walter.
I just thought they should know that you're a monk and you've been in the monastery. So
Yeah. So
they don't know that. Not just an average guy sitting there
No.
through the monastery.
No, it's still everything. Anyway, yeah. Yeah, so I was in the monastery when I was in young, since I was 10 years old, until I was 23, so 13 years in the monastery, and then I've been traveling around, mostly translating for the teachers, and teaching a little bit here and there, but mostly translating. So that's what I do here also. So we have a resident geisha here. A geisha is a monk and teacher. So maybe you might have met him, right? You know Geshe Ngao? You know? You don't know?
This was my first
Oh, your first time here. Okay, all right. Yeah. So that's what I do here also. I translate. Okay. Any questions?
I have some at home.
Huh?
I have some that I don't remember them at home.
So maybe it's going to be a very short night. If you have no questions.
Basically, just maybe you can explain some of that.
So, who knows about Buddhism? April?
I know about it.
You know about it?
I understand.
Okay. So you have all studied about Buddhism a little bit here and there. Cheryl, have you?
I think I understand it, but
Mhm.
I don't know about it.
Okay, that's a good way of putting. So
I-
who can tell what is Buddhism? Can somebody explain what is Buddhism? Do you know what is Buddhism? What is Buddhism? In a very simple way. Chris.
A path?
Path. Okay.
Studying the teachings of the Buddha.
Mhm. Is that right? So path. That's interesting. What kind of path?
It's a path to enlightenment and a path to the leaving behind of suffering for oneself and others.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, Buddhism, can be defined in many different ways, right? So basically, what Buddhism is the teachings of the Buddha. The teachings taught by Buddha is called Buddhism. So Buddhism, right? So Buddhism is teaching taught by Buddha. And so what is the teaching? What is our teaching? What is our teaching?
One is like no self, existence.
Oh, that's going too profound. No, just kidding. Wow, that's like I'm always lost. Where's no self? Yeah, so all those are teachings, right? So teaching, is a method. What is teaching? It's a method, right? Method. That's all it is, And the method, to, like Chris said, to overcome sufferings. Right? So Buddha said, do this, do that, right? And you'll be free from suffering. So that's his teaching, and that's a method to free from suffering. So basically, teaching is a method, right? And Buddhism is the method or teaching taught by Buddha. Very simple, right? So that's what Buddhism is. That's what the teachings of the Buddha is. So now, of course, we can go more in detail, right? So what is suffering? So this teachings of the Buddha is a method to overcome suffering. So what is suffering? Attachment. You should be asking questions. I'm asking the question. I'm asking all the questions. So what is suffering, right? So attachment. Okay. What else?
Life itself.
Life itself. Okay. What do you think, Barbara? I know you like to be very quiet, but today you have to speak.
You're the teacher.
See, I told you I'm not teacher. I told you already. We're here to discuss. I'm just a discussion leader.
I've always had a hard time with that statement that life is suffering, and I think that translation of that idea is misleading, because I don't think that life in and of itself is suffering, though I do believe that the things in life, how one conducts themselves and the things they choose to attach themselves to can lead to that suffering.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on that idea of life is suffering? Because I think there's a lot of wonderful things in life, and it always bothers me when it's
Yeah.
stated that way.
So it is a debatable issue, right? You know. So, sorry, maybe you should introduce yourself.
I'm Scott.
Okay, here's Scott. Chris,
Hi.
Cheryl, April, Barbara, Karen, and Walter. So, Scott. So, like Scott said, you know, so he says, okay, so this is just a discussion. We're debating discussion, right? Discussing about. So you said life is suffering. Life is suffering. So what is the wrong? What is wrong if you say life is suffering, right? So, you know, in the discussion, when we talk about, particularly in Buddhist discussion, and we call it debate, right? So in the debate, you know, in Buddhism, when we debate, it's a fabulous thing to debate, because that opens your eye, that opens your mind, you know, so that develops your wisdom. It's a really good thing. Not that I'm fond of it, but, you know, it's a very good thing. I have to be honest, right? When I was in the monastery, we have to debate, right? So we have to debate every night. So compulsory, right? So even if you don't have any question, you just have to debate. And even if you don't have any doubts, you still have to debate. You have to create the doubt by yourself. And I'm not a very creative person, you know. And so I always try to escape, you know, the debate. And especially when you're, you know, like, confronted by so many people at the same time, and you have to debate in the big group. Like in the monastery, there will be like hundreds of monks, and so there will be two persons sitting in the row in the center of the two rows. There are two rows on each side, and the two people will be sitting there, and then one person will be standing up and then debating. So when he debates, he has to ask questions. So everybody has to take turn, you know, to stand up and then ask questions, and so everybody will be staring at you. What are you going to talk about, you know? And so it's really embarrassing, right? So I didn't like that part. Anyway, so, but the debating is really good. It's very good. So, like Scott said, life is suffering. So now, if you think life is not suffering, right? You have to come with the point or the reason. So what part of life is not suffering?
I mean, there are many peaceful moments in life that I think are just sublimely wonderful.
Like what, for example?
To sit and watch the leaves in the trees just move.
Mm-hmm. So maybe like getting into a cool water in a hot summer day.
Not even that. I mean,
So
sometimes
is that not suffering?
I would say not.
Yeah, like that. So those kind of things. So Scott, what do you think of that?
So the statement was a little hyperbolic. For a fact. But I think that the teaching is suffering exists. And the causes of suffering are, so not every moment is suffering, obviously. There are joyful moments. We can love without attachment, supposedly, but life, you know, I'm not sure I'm able to do that, but supposedly you're supposed to be able to love without attachment. But I think there are moments in our life that are joyful and wonderful and kind, but with those moments come suffering. I mean, with those moments come attachment, and with those moments come, and then, unless we have the medicine, then suffering comes. So it was a hyperbolic statement. I mean, it was.
I know. And again, you'll notice how I phrased it.
Even though he doesn't agree, but I agree. Life is suffering. I'm trying to challenge Nick, Chris here. So no, I'm just kidding. But really,
I mean,
when we think about life, right? When we think about life, again, you know, how it is defined, suffering. You know, what is suffering and how it is defined, right? What people think of suffering as. So that all depends. But it's not necessary that what people think is suffering and what they don't think is not suffering. It's not that. You know, so there's a suffering which is suffering, and you know, conventionally suffering and suffering, and so So when we think about life as a human being, life as a human being, or life as an animal, even a life as a human being. So it is very difficult to point a moment that is free of suffering. I'll tell you why. So again, when we talk about the suffering, so when you're standing up, you feel good, but when you stand for too long, you feel painful, right? You feel tired. Same, and then you feel like sitting down, and then you keep on sitting, and then you feel tired again sitting. So sitting was pleasure at the beginning, but then it turns into suffering, right? If you were not sitting, you will not have that suffering of sitting. Yeah? And so that everything in our life changes into suffering, and that is one type of suffering that is defined in Buddhism as suffering. It's called suffering of change.
Right.
And so everything in our life, so even like enjoying the food, like you go and have, maybe you like the French fries, you like it, you love it, oh, it's so delicious. But if you keep on eating, then you feel, bored of it. You don't feel any pleasure in eating more of it, and then you even feel like, suffering, like you start to get stomach ache, and maybe like worse, even like constipation and all these things. So all this comes from that, that pleasure that we attach to eating French fries or things like that. So in that way, in the life of human beings, ordinary human beings, of course, right? So it's almost everything is suffering.
Because your experience of it is not constant.
That's right. Yes. So everything that changes into suffering,
Right.
So that changes into suffering.
Well, I think
So-
that my understanding of it is that it goes in opposition to something, which is part of the changing,
Mm-hmm.
but that you're not ever really, okay. Because you get hungry, you want to eat, and then you think you feel good while you're eating because you are hungry. Even if you don't overeat,
Yes.
to the point where you make yourself sick,
Mm-hmm.
you think that you're in pleasure because you're eating, but it's only because you were in suffering for being hungry.
That's right. Yes.
When you're done eating, you're going to get hungry again,
Mm-hmm.
and this will go on and on until you die.
Exactly. Yeah.
Anything you enjoy, like if it's a cool breeze because you were a little hot a minute ago, or
Mhm.
because you were, is in terms of something else. That's always like seeking.
So yeah. So that changes
a
into.
really subtle
Yeah.
level.
Mhm.
So there's never just like an actual like pleasurable moment that is like entirely for pleasure's sake and not in like the dualistic mind.
Yeah. So there's this thing, that changes, right? That transforms into suffering. So that's why we call it suffering of change.
But your experience, is your experience of those things is relative to your perception of it at that moment, and it is not necessarily in and of itself always a good thing, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. So, having said that, so do you agree now everything in life is suffering?
I think the statement, life is suffering, is not as hyperbolic as I thought it was.
Sorry to point you, but you shouldn't be facing the to the holy objects. So yeah, just to let you know. Yeah. So that's what I know. Like, this is all about debate, right? So you say yes, and then you have to come to say no,
Mm-hmm.
and then after something you come to say, but no, yeah, it's true, yes, and then you go back saying no, So that's what the debater has to make, is the person to say it. And so that's a very good way of debating, and that really increases your. So okay, if I think in this way, then I can think in this way, and then I can think in this way, and so it makes you think more open-mindedly. So that's so. All right, Marion.
But again, is it Chris?
Yeah.
Going back to what Chris says, isn't it eventually like our perception that gets us through those moments? That's part of it.
Yes, definitely.
Because when he was saying, life can be pleasurable, that to me is sounding like he's sort of trying to remove some sort of like ignorance around
Yes.
whatever that issue is for that he's talking about. So,
Yes.
I mean, because how you choose, which ultimately you do, how you choose to perceive something and therefore in response react to it is to some extent, within your own control.
Yeah. And that would then help us interact with others in terms of removing the sense of self, that we are not just here for our own selves, or
Yes.
eventually broadening out so that we are more on the path.
Mhm.
Enlightenment for the sake of.
Yes, that's true. So there are these kind of things in life that's not suffering, right? Like Miriam said. So if you, like, say, for example, you're hungry and you really, you're like greedy to eat something, and you eat a lot, and then that changes into suffering, right? And you feel tired of standing up, you sit down, you think it's pleasure, then you keep on sitting, and then afterwards it turns into suffering. And then same, with cold, and then you get into a heat, and then after some time, then it becomes too hot, and then you get suffering. So those are things, all changes into suffering. So why does that changes into suffering? Right? So not necessarily that everything changes into suffering, right? What kind of things doesn't change into suffering? What kind of things that we do doesn't change into suffering? And it's okay for us to do, right, if it doesn't change into suffering. But if it changes into suffering, then what is the point of doing that? All right?
So studying the Dharma, that wouldn't be something.
Yeah, that's true. Studying Dharma or developing compassion.
If it's very long and you don't understand how it's suffering.
That's a perception. Right?
That's true. That's true. That's really true. It can turn into suffering, right? So that suffering is worthwhile. So that suffering that you take is, okay, I'm going to really work hard, and no matter how long it takes, I'm going to make myself understand that. If you make that kind of effort, that effort will be really good. Of course, you have to go through so much difficulties. Practicing Dharma is not easy at all. It's not pleasurable. It is suffering. It is suffering, but it brings happiness, right? It brings happiness, So that's why it is good, because that changes into happiness. Right? That's the suffering that changes into happiness. We don't want to have suffering that changes, happiness that changes into suffering, but suffering that changes into happiness.
But isn't all suffering, once accepted, then and released in a sense? Isn't the nature of releasing or letting it go change it into happiness anyway?
So that not necessarily is suffering, right? So that can be happiness. If you let go, you feel happy. If you hold on to it, then that makes you unhappy. Anyway, so so if you have compassion, right? If you have love or compassion, having love and compassion is not suffering at all, right? And the more compassion you have, more happy you feel. So you never feel like that never changes into suffering.
I don't agree.
Damchoe? No. Sorry.
More compassion you have,
No, I think love can cause.
Love,
It
if
can
it's
be very
if it's
painful.
turned by attachment.
Yeah.
Because
yeah. What kind of love you're talking about?
Yeah, because
Yeah,
if the love for your children or the love for
Yes.
your spouse, this is very much attachment as well.
Right.
Yeah, that's true.
And these things are temporary, just like suffering.
That's right. That's again, how we define the love, right? So love, in Buddhism, is thought or wish for others to be happy. So you don't care about yourself, you just want others to be happy. That's love. Yeah. The love for your children, of course you want them to be happy, but then you also have some expectation towards you, right? If the child is not good to you, then you'll not be happy, right? I love my child, but if my child is more fond of other person than me, then I'm not going to be happy.
But I think there's another side of that. You can love and wish somebody well
Yes,
and see them suffering, and that causes you suffering.
yes.
Is that attachment? Because it's empathy, I think.
Sympathy, yes.
And
That is good. That is good, because then you want
it's still
it's a suffering, but it's good. Like I said, that suffering is good because that brings happiness.
Yeah.
That brings happiness for yourself, and that brings happiness to others. So that's a good suffering, and it's worthwhile. It's like practicing patience is very good. Of course, it's difficult. It's not pleasurable at the beginning, but if more you practice patience, more happiness you become, more happy you become. more happiness it brings, to yourself and to others. So those kind of things in our life brings happiness. More we experience, positive things, right? So negative things like attachment, all this, everything that is to do with attachment brings only suffering. So again, to clarify that, maybe you can say, a life with attachment is all suffering. With any kind of affliction, it's all suffering. Like, with anger, jealousy, arrogance, pride, all these things, it's all suffering. But with the positive attitudes like love, compassion, bodhicitta, it's all happiness. Right? You agree?
Well,
Scott, you had
I have
something.
a question about, so this is, you're the perfect person, I've had this question for a while. The Tibetan understanding of the word happiness versus English, and I feel like there's differences in how, one, are there different ways to talk about happiness in Tibetan? And is the concept the same in English? Because I feel like there's different ways of talking about happiness. There's ecstasy, there's giddiness, there's lots of qualities of happiness, and I'm curious how that differ. What's the Tibetan sense of what that means in terms of?
Well, I don't think it would be correct to say Tibetan and Westerner.
Okay.
So we can Tibetans also feel happy, with those things.
Right.
To eat a hamburger, they feel happy.
But I mean, is there
When they're hungry.
I understand that. That is not my
Buddhism, right? Yeah.
Buddhist
So
view versus the
non-Buddhist.
I mean the word happiness. Is it a direct translation, one for one? Is it the same word?
no, whatever it means in English,
It is.
it's that. So,
Right.
but again, what is the happiness, right? So many people can define happiness in different ways, right? Having a new car is happiness.
Right.
Having a new house is happiness. And or some people may define like, working for others is happiness.
Right.
If people are in trouble, you go there out there and help them, to rescue them and do things like that. That makes people happy. So those things, so whatever makes them feel good about doing it, that's happiness. That's how it is defined, right? So, but when we're talking about the happiness in Buddhism, we're not talking just about temporary happiness. We're talking about ultimate happiness that's completely free of all the sufferings. Right? So the happiness of liberation or happiness of enlightenment.
Okay.
And so that kind of happiness, that doesn't change at all. It's the real happiness.
Got it.
It's the real happiness. The other happiness is temporary happiness.
Right.
Right? So it brings you feel good for some time, but then you don't feel good all the time. But once you achieve that happiness of enlightenment or liberation, then that is all the time feeling very good. You feel very good all the time. So that's you can define the happiness in that way.
Okay.
Right? So temporary happiness and everlasting happiness. The happiness that's always happiness.
Big H, small H.
That's right. Right?
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So maybe I'm just being too literal. Is that comment that, unless you're enlightened, there's no happiness?
No real happiness. Not everlasting happiness. But there is some happiness, temporary happiness. Yes, we all have that. Even an animal can have that, right? Birds can have that too. So insects may have that too. That kind of happiness. Yes, we all have that. But everlasting happiness, no, we don't have that. Until you achieve liberation or enlightenment, you don't have the everlasting happiness.
So what's the difference between what is everlasting happiness?
Everlasting happiness is that stays as happiness all the time. That doesn't change. Like, when you have a new car, you feel happy, right? But then that is only for temporary, like maybe for a few days or maybe a few months or maybe a year at most. Then after some time, then you see the stains, the scratches, and all these things, and you don't feel happy at all. And then you think about, I have to pay the car loan now, I have to pay the insurance, and I have to fill the gas. All this suffering, comes up. So that kind of happiness is very short, temporary happiness. So the everlasting happiness, once you achieve that, then it's happy all the time. It's like first moment of having car all the time.
It's just like-
First moment of having brand new Mercedes car and all the time.
Oh, yeah.
So just like a gratitude for existence,
Yeah, you can say that also.
whatever it is.
Yeah.
So it transcends the material world.
Yes.
It's probably difficult for us to really get it.
So we understand suffering now?
Wow.
Huh? So it's really difficult to understand suffering in general, right? Understand and realize. So when we say understand and realize, so there are two different things: understanding intellectually, or understanding innately, or spontaneously. So that is two different things. So you understand, I understand, we all understand that suffering. We understand that having a brand new car is not happiness. We understand that, right? I mean, it makes sense, right? With all these explanations and logics, we understand that it's not happiness. But we do really realize that?
What do you mean by realizing?
See, that's the difference, right?
So you're saying there's various levels of realization, is that what
Yeah.
you're saying?
I think Karen wants to say
So-
something.
If I can understand something, to me it must mean that I've had some experience of it. So, but for me to remember it often or all the time, what creates that consistency of remembering? Like, at what point have I realized that? Is it when I always remember? So is there a graduated learning of, so I'm remembering more and more and more, and then, so it's a gradual, and then,
There's this understanding, like you said, experiencing. So when you experience it, you understand more, right? Right. If somebody says, cutting your hand is suffering. But if you have really had cut your hand, then you really understand that suffering. Right? If you haven't cut your hand, you'll not understand. Then intellectually, logically, you will understand that suffering. Yeah, that's right. When you cut, it bleeds. So it's painful. You can understand from there. But then when you really cut it yourself, then you really understand that suffering, right? So that's also sympathy, empathy, that you have for others. When you have gone through yourself, then when you see on others, then it's more easy to have, that feeling for them, feeling of compassion for them. When you have that, when you have gone through yourself. So one way of realizing is going through understanding. Going through experiencing, right? But it's not necessary. So what makes you realize, is thinking again, like you said, remembering it all the time. Right? Remembering it all the time. It is suffering. It is suffering. It is suffering. At some point we forget and say, "Oh no, it's not suffering. It's happiness. I want to go and get a new car." So that because we are forgetting it. We're forgetting that it's suffering. So when we remember that it is suffering, then we will not go for it. So knowingly we will not go in, right? We know that it will burn if we jump into fire. We will not jump, right? Because we know it. We really know it, right? So we have to understand other form of sufferings like that. Yeah. So of course, that suffering comes afterwards, which seemed like a happiness at the beginning, and now it turned into suffering. So that suffering is even more difficult to understand. So we talk about suffering, suffering of change, and all-pervasive suffering. So the suffering of suffering is like the suffering of having cut or being burned and so forth. So those kind of sufferings we can understand as suffering. So we'll not knowingly do that. But the suffering of change, logically it makes sense, but again, still it's very difficult for us to understand that as a suffering, unless we remember it all the time. And for that, we have to meditate. So meditation is like process of remembering that is suffering, is suffering, is suffering. Yeah? So meditation means to familiarize. Just sitting there with your eyes closed and cross-legged and body straight or back straight, it's not meditation. Right? If your mind is going all over the place, that's not meditation. So even if you're not doing that, but if you're familiarizing your mind with one object, so it's like this, like this, like that, then that's meditation. So that is the whole meaning of meditation. The meaning of meditation is to familiarize, to get used to it, to familiarize with it. So that's meditation. So if you meditate on that thought, on the suffering of change, and you say, now, okay, that's the suffering of change, that's suffering of change, that's the suffering of change, and it's a suffering, it's suffering, it's suffering. If you think like that all the time, then eventually you come to realize it. And when you have realized it, then you will not do it.
Or you will not get frustrated by the fact that something is changing.
That's right,
because
yeah.
You kind of know that it's
No
just...
body.
So just reading about it and really taking it in as you're reading, is that functioning in the same way as a meditation?
So reading is of course very important. Through reading you come to understand. And then whatever you have understood, then you familiarize with that. Familiarize your mind with that. You think about it. So first reading is studying. And then you say, oh, it is like that. So you're thinking. That's contemplation. And then it's not, oh really, it's really like that. Okay, that's right, that, like that. And so you keep on thinking on that. It becomes meditation. So study, contemplation, and meditation. So these three are very important. And so first you have to study, of course. Without studying, you can't think, right? If you don't know what is suffering, if you haven't studied or learned about suffering, then you don't know what is suffering. If you don't know what is suffering, then you cannot familiarize your mind with that, with something as suffering.
So familiarizing in the meditation is being able to literally talk to yourself about what you just read.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, you can put it that way. Yes.
So it's like, I think of it as things going in when you read and things potentially coming out when you're meditating. Or deepening or whatever.
Deepening. Yeah. You can say it that way. Yeah. So reading is very important, definitely.
So of the three items that you just talked about, the reading, the
Study.
contemplating and meditating, can you elaborate on the difference between the contemplating and meditating?
So contemplating and meditating. Contemplating is almost like, analytical thought. So I say, oh yes, it is suffering because it changes into suffering. So having new car is not really happiness because it, becomes old, it gets scratches, and I have to go through all these payments and so forth. So all you're thinking that, that's a contemplation. And then you come to say, oh yeah, that's really suffering. That's a suffering. And then you want to focus on that thought. Just think about it like that. Suffering, suffering, suffering. And in your mind it's going of course you're not saying suffering, suffering, but your mind is constantly thinking that as suffering. So you don't have to even close your eyes, you just sit there and then say, suffering like that. So you familiarize your mind, so that is meditation. And once you have found it, and then you just hold on that thought. Keep your mind on that thought. Yeah? That's meditation. And so when you're thinking about it, oh yeah, this is suffering. Yes, because it's this, because that. So that's contemplation. So analytical meditation and contemplation are very similar.
So is the meditation more of the feeling of the conclusion that you come to, or is it really is it a mental?
It's a mental mind that thinks, that keeps on thinking on that thought. So whatever thought you have discovered, say, okay, so this is because of this, because that, this is like this. You come to say, okay, this is like this. And then you focus, you keep on your mind on that. And at that time, you don't go around and say, why it is like this, why it's like this. You don't think like this. Because you have already come to the conclusion that, yes, it is like this. And then you keep your mind on that thought.
It's not a feeling, it's all in.
Well, you can say feeling or you can say thought, yeah. So it's a thought. It's a mind, that keeps thinking that it is like this, it is like that. So that's the difference. So if you say, okay, I'm thinking of going to, Boston, and things like that. So that's contemplation. Your mind, your contemplation means like thinking, right? And then meditation is holding on that thought. Yeah.
I'm confused because I have heard that in some places, but then I've also read and learned about like letting go of thoughts and having just space and emptiness and trying to get there, which is why meditation can be very challenging.
Yeah, so there are different forms of meditations, so you can meditate on many different things. So like I said, meditation, the actual meaning of meditation is to familiarize your mind. So if you let go, if you let go your thoughts, just don't think of anything, you're familiarizing your mind also with that. It's difficult because the thoughts keep coming up, right, in our mind all the time, and so to not think about all these things is very difficult. So, but you have to practice on that to have that thought, right? And so that itself can be meditation also, because, like I said, it's familiarizing, right? But again, what kind of meditation are we looking for here? Why do we want to meditate, right? Why do we want to familiarize our mind with such and such things? So we want to familiarize our mind with the thing that brings happiness to us, right? So if that mind of not thinking anything brings happiness, then we can meditate on that. So meditating on love, compassion, and bodhicitta brings happiness. So if you think about that, then you do that. Right? If you meditate on compassion, you become more compassionate, and more compassionate you are, more happiness. More happy you become. So therefore, it is good, to meditate on that. So the purpose of meditating on that is so that we can be happy. And then, of course, then you apply that thought on others, and the happiness that you want, because you want like that, and just like you, others are also same. So they want to be happy, and we should wish for them to be happy, because they are also like myself, and so that way, therefore, they should be happy too, like that. So that thought, is the compassion. And if you have more of that thought you have, more happy you feel, and more happiness you can bring to others also. And so anyway, so that is the main purpose of meditation. And then to have the positive attitude or to overcome the negative attitude, you have to meditate on something, right? So something that brings that develops more positive attitude, or something that overcomes more negative attitudes. You have to meditate on that thought. Then that will help you to overcome. So just by not thinking of anything, you will not overcome. It's pleasurable. It's relaxing. It's peaceful at that time. But that alone will not be able to overcome all those sufferings, all those delusions that bring suffering. To overcome those delusions, you have to develop the contract, the contract, attitude, the thought that counters with that. So, so like for hatred, to overcome hatred, you have to develop love. You can't. Of course, to some extent, the love can destroy the hatred. So if you love somebody, you will not have that person. Right? If you have love, then that will overcome the hatred. And of course, the completely, love cannot also overcome the hatred completely. So it is the mind that understands the reality, that understands, in other words, the famous word emptiness. Right? So only that can overcome all the delusions completely. But other than that, the other minds can overcome a little bit, but not completely. Right? So anyway, we're going into too many things. So, suffering. So it's very important to understand suffering, right? So suffering. Once we understand the suffering, then we'll think about getting rid of suffering. If you don't think of that as a suffering, then we'll not think about getting rid of it. If we don't think of getting rid of it, then we'll never do anything to get rid of it. Right? So first, important to understand suffering. So what are the three main sufferings we talked about?
Gross suffering, suffering of change, and all ultimate suffering.
So all pervasive sufferings. So those are the three sufferings. Right? Suffering of pain or suffering of change, and all pervasive suffering. So suffering of suffering we understand very easy, right? Like a headache, stomach ache, and a back ache, knee ache, whatever kind of ache we have. It's all suffering of suffering. The suffering of change is those we think are happiness and that changes into suffering. Right? Like having a new house, having a new car, having new clothes, new jewelry, all these things. Right? We think it's happiness. And then afterwards it changes into suffering. So those are the suffering. Those are very difficult to understand as a suffering. And most of us, we don't understand that as a suffering. Or we understand logically, intellectually, but not, really have realized that. And because of that, we still run after that. We still run after those sufferings. And same with the relationships, right? Somebody thinks, when they have a boyfriend or a girlfriend, they think they will be very happy. But then again, that changes into suffering. Again, of course, not necessary. But again, if when we do that with attachment, it changes into suffering. But when we do that with a real, pure love or compassion, then no, it doesn't, right? But again, in our worldly relationship, it is all with attachment. Right? So when we do with the attachment, then definitely it all brings into suffering. So having a boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, all that brings suffering. Right? So everything. So those are the suffering of change. But it's very difficult. So we, because it's so difficult to understand, we go one after another relationships, right? Then we broke up with one boyfriend or girlfriend, then we would, after some time we want to go with another one again. And we already forgot that how much suffering that was, and then we want to go with another one again, right? So, these are very difficult to understand as a suffering, but that's a real suffering. And then all pervasive suffering is even more difficult to understand. So let's not even talk about that.
Give a few examples. I'm trying to remember what is all pervasive suffering.
So all pervasive suffering is really difficult to understand. I don't understand. I can try to explain, but I don't understand.
I doubt that.
No, the all pervasive suffering, is in general it is the continuation of this contaminated aggregate.
Okay.
So the aggregate, the body itself, is a suffering. We don't understand that, right? It's really difficult to understand. The body is suffering. Is body suffering? Is house suffering? No, house is not suffering, right? But house is suffering. Body is suffering. Because you have this body, therefore you experience suffering, right? If you don't have head, you will not have the headache. So having head itself is suffering.
Right.
Is that because of aging, sickness, eventual death?
No.
That would be change.
Because
That is suffering of that is suffering of suffering.
Okay.
That is suffering of suffering.
Okay.
We can understand that easily. That when you age, you have all the suffering. When you are sick, you have suffering. Of course, that I understand. But just this body, the aggregate that we have, is suffering.
it exists, therefore it suffers?
Therefore we suffer, right?
So it's cyclic existence. I mean, it's the fact.
Cyclic existence, yeah.
It's the fact that we're caught in the.
The continuation of this contaminated aggregate that is brought by karma and delusion. So that's the definition of all pervasive suffering. And unless you have really studied Buddhism and really understand about Buddhism, you will not understand that suffering. So, but basically you just have to think this. Whatever I came with, that's suffering. Because I have this, therefore I have suffering. Because you have car, therefore you have you have to go through all those troubles. If you didn't have car, if you didn't have house, you'll not have to repair your roof. You'll not have to, dig into your basement and to work on that, pipes and things.
Are you
So anyway, those are all those are the a little bit more difficult to understand as a suffering. Yeah, it's true that I have to pay for my car, paying for the car is suffering, taking care of the car is suffering. But the fact is that having car itself is suffering. The very car is suffering. Right? If you didn't have that, you would not have all the sufferings. All the sufferings that you have to go through of having car. Right? Having paid repairing it, paying for the loan, paying the insurance, all these things comes from car. So that's a very a simple way of understanding the all pervasive suffering.
You can't have problems with a car if you don't have a car.
Exactly.
Well, the car is great when you are
The same with this
Not
body.
be suffering.
There will be no suffering. But this body, we got it, right? We kind of bought this body. We bought this body by paying with karma and delusion.
Previous karma.
That's right, with previous karma. We created a karma. We created a cause, therefore we have this body. Right? So now all these sufferings have a cause. Like the suffering of change, all pervasive suffering, they all have cause. And the cause is karma and delusion. The cause of the suffering is karma and delusion. Right? So that's the actual source of all these sufferings, karma and delusion. So because we have created a karma, karma, right? Karma. So karma means action, right? Anything that we do is an action, right? Whatever we do, like talking, doing something with our body, physically, verbally, mentally, all these karma, right? It's actions that we engage in through our body, speech, and mind. That's action. That's a karma. Right? And then the karma that's motivated by delusions, like attachment, right? So out of attachment, then you go and buy food. Out of attachment, you go and kill animal to eat its meat, right? So those kind of actions, it's all motivated by delusions, like attachment, anger, So out of anger, then you go and kill somebody or stab at somebody or speak bad about somebody, say harsh words. Right? So those are all this. So that's the karma and delusion. So those karma and delusion are the cause of all this suffering. So because we have created those, for those causes, therefore we have suffering, and therefore we have this suffering of change, and all pervasive suffering. And so now, in order to be free from suffering, we have to destroy the cause of the suffering. So as long as we have the cause, we'll keep on creating the causes, then we'll keep on having results of those causes, right? And so the the method, the teachings of the Buddha, the Buddhism, right, is the method to overcome. So that's the path, like Chris said at the beginning. The Buddhism teachings of the Buddha is the method, is the path, to overcome those sufferings. And then when you achieve liberation, through that path, through following those paths, when you achieve liberation or enlightenment, that's the everlasting happiness. Right? All right. Your turn to ask question. So you got some idea about all pervasive suffering?
Some idea, yeah.
Some ideas. Yeah, you have to. I know you like reading, so you should read more and more. More you read, more you will understand. Good.
I mean, it makes sense, but like you said, it's hard. The hard part is truly knowing it.
Truly knowing it, yeah. So realizing it or experiencing it, whatever you call it, So in Tibetan we have this different word. Shepa, which means to understand, and tokpa, which means to realize. In English, it has the same, but realizing, let's say the difference in Tibetan, shepa and tokpa. Shepa, which means understand, realizing, which we translate as, the tokpa, which we translate as realizing. So realizing is knowing through meditation, through familiarization. Not just knowing, but knowing through meditation. That's realizing. So you have meditated on it, and then when you have perfected meditation on that topic, and the understanding you have at that time is the realization.
The way I can understand it is the difference between what, like in Western psychology, they'll call the difference between intellectually understanding and emotionally understanding. Because they talk about that a lot, like with the grieving process and things like that, where you like can intellectually understand something, but your emotions haven't caught up. Where like if you're emotionally caught up, what I consider realizing it. But I know like in Buddhism and a lot of Eastern thought, they don't separate.
Yes.
It's all one.
No, like
it's all one. They don't separate.
Yeah, understanding emotionally is deeper than just understanding intellectually, but realizing is even deeper than that. Emotionally understanding is only when you have emotion, right? When you are in the emotion, like when you see somebody is dead, you know, then then you feel the suffering. When you really see it, you know, at that time you feel the emotion.
No, I
and
think more the parallel that I would draw is like, let's say someone dies and you intellectually, like say they die suddenly and someone you're very close to, it can take you like, you know, minutes or hours or weeks, depending on the shock, to mentally understand that it happened. It could take you like a year or multiple years for your emotions for the grieving process to finish and your emotions to catch up to your mind. At least in the West, what we call emotions. There might be like deeper levels of consciousness, like seated there, you know, are mixed in with all of that, but for your, what they call emotions to catch up with the mind. That's kind of what I likened the realization piece to, and it's like fully integrated into each level of your reaction all the time. Like,
so that's what I'm saying, you know, like the realization that we're talking about in Buddhism is even deeper than that. And is something that when you come to realize it, of course, you know, there is a degradation of that also, but not as fast as the emotion. You know, like you said, emotion can last for a day or two or a month or a year, you know, and after that, again, you feel normal. You know, you say, oh, okay, nothing. Okay, so then you go back. You don't understand that. Oh, that was a suffering. You know, somebody died and this, and you forgot about it. You know, like parents die and then children grieve. You know, for maybe a month or two or for a year, and after that they forgot, and then they're back to their partying life, right? The party life. So I mean that is temporary, right? Very temporary. That shows it's very temporary. The emotion is like that, you know. And again, emotion, you know, is to do with your feeling mostly, you know. It's not really logical, not really reasonable. That kind of realization.
But in Western psychology, don't they sometimes fumble emotion into other things? Into like bigger realizations, bigger pieces of consciousness.
Definitely, yeah.
And they try to separate and fracture these parts of the psyche that are like one or should be one.
Yes, that's true. Yeah. So anyway, so realization, you know, is something like that. So more that thought that you have, you know, understanding of that, you know, the thought and understanding of the thing through meditation. So if you haven't meditated it, you can't realize it. You'll understand it, but you will not realize it. To realize it, you have to meditate. So understanding that comes through meditation is called realization. Let's put it that way.
It's almost like being in a science class and learning something, and then going off and doing the experiment yourself, and then coming to the same conclusion. It's a different process.
Yes.
So you can be taught about emptiness and understand it, you know, but unless you've seen it, realized it yourself, then through meditation,
yes, exactly,
you won't realize it. You'll only understand.
So it's like the hand-on experience.
Right. Exactly. Okay.
Yeah, that's what meditation. That's what realization is, through meditation. So the doctor, you know, the teacher might say, oh, there's a heart, and the heart is this arteries, that artery, all these things. But then when you really see the heart and then you go through that, it's different, right? A little bit more different. So anyway, yeah.
So you said that even realizations can degrade?
Yes. Or they can, you know, degenerate. It's possible, you know. So it depends again on which level you are at, all right? And so we talk about, in Buddhism we talk about different path, different level of path. And so, I mean, just understanding Buddhism, you haven't even entered into the path. So to enter into the path, you have to have certain level, certain understanding, certain realization. And once you have that, and then you enter into the path. So when you enter into the path, then you're really in that at the high level. But again, it is still possible for you to degenerate your realization and come out of path. Yeah, and then out of work, of course. And then you get to the certain level in the path. You go to a certain level, and then when you get there, then you never come down. But until then, it's still possible.
So, I'm sorry. So, isn't life and living though the path? Like the big path. So, again, maybe I'm just too literal when you say getting off the path.
No. I was talking about it, but a higher level of education in Buddhism, knowledge about Buddhism. So we talk about a path. That's so the path that I was talking about is kind of realization. It's a knowledge, right? So you have learned something, you have meditated on it, and then you have come to some level of understanding, realization. At that time, you enter into the path. Before that, you have not entered into that path. So of course, life is a path also. Of course, life is a path. Everything that we do is a path. It's a path to going somewhere. Yeah. But it's not. I was not talking about that kind of path. So the higher realization of path. So path, which is gained through realizing the teachings, and experiencing it. So that's a little bit different than what normal path we will talk about. So it can degenerate, and so realization, is not necessarily that stable. Until you reach that level, and if you have not reached that level, then it can degenerate. And then, of course, you have to make more effort, and sometimes it might not be that difficult because you have already realized it before. So you came down. Oh no, and have to go back, and then you go back. It's easier because you have already gone through that before, and it's not that difficult. But then sometimes you completely give it up, and then it becomes very difficult. Again, depends on which path you follow and where you're trying to come back to. All this. That's too much information.
Yeah, it's too much.
Let's just talk about suffering.
You did bring up you said realizations could degenerate. I know you're talking at different levels, but could you give just a rough example of what that means?
Well, it's just like understanding. You come to understand, you realize it, and then after some time you get carried away by other things, and then you forgot about it. All right.
That's just at a different level of realization.
Yeah, so in normal, like April said, we got emotion, right? Because we have an encounter with such and such event, right? Somebody, very close person died, and then we become emotion, and then that grievance, seems like there all the time. At that moment, it seems like it's there all the time. It will never degenerate, but it goes away after some time, right? Because you get carried away with other things. If you're only thinking about that, that all the time, you'll never be free. You'll never get out of that, And you think about other things in life, and then going to meet with other friends, going to go around other places in the world, and then you see these beautiful meadows and skies and all these things, and then you forget about that grievance. Forget about the fact that somebody very close to you have just passed away. So that can go away. So that's like the realization is understanding of that. And then when you go into somewhere else, then you can, so like you're meditating all the time, right? And then, you're in the mountains meditating. Okay, let's say you're in mountains meditating, your thought is always there. You have good realization of all these teachings and the practices. But then you come out, to the city one time, and then You don't see so much, and then you go back, and then you come next time. Often you come, more often you come, then more things you see, then you start to forget your life up there.
Okay.
So that's same, in the monasteries. That's the reason why monasteries are in the remote place. It has to be outside of the city. Yeah? So like, in my experience, when I was in the monastery, when I stayed in monastery, I really liked doing the practices, the studies and all these things. Then when I come out, come down to the city, then I get distracted by all these things. And people talking about, having a house, having a car, and it says, oh, such and such person has built a, nice house, and he's taking care of his parents so well, and you're not doing anything,
Right. Become
So-
a Buddha.
Exactly. So more you come out, I mean, when I was young, I never stayed in the monastery, so I was always running out of the monastery, I didn't want to follow those rules, waking up very early in the morning, going to do the prayers, and whole day, studying, and then even evening, debating and chanting, all these things I didn't like so much. So I used to, go down to the city to my relatives. My parents were not there. Luckily, my parents were not, in Kathmandu, and they were in India working and earning money. So my uncle, that was my mother's younger brother, was in Kathmandu. So I would always go to him, and then he was so harsh with me, and he would like beat me, and then he would like chase me, all the time.
Because you weren't studying?
Because I came out, of monastery so
out,
much, Yeah, I mean, of course, that thought was not there at that time. I was too young to think about that. And then, as a child, of course, I didn't like that. I hated it, I hated my uncle. I said, no, he's a bad guy, a bad person. And then I didn't like being going to him at all. And then when my mom came, and then of course my mom is her brother. Of course, she wants to go to his house and others. And then I would like, no, you can't go there. And when we were there, and I said, no, let's leave. So I was like that. And I know one time I feel very bad when my uncle's my aunt, uncle's wife, she made a very nice dinner. And my mom loves that, that dish so much, and I didn't let her stay there because I didn't like my uncle. I said, I kept on pulling on her, and poor mom, of course, had to go with me, and I felt very bad, because she really loves that dish, and she didn't get to eat that. So then later thinking about that, and then later, when I come to realize that it's really important to study and be in the monastery, then I started to stay up there more, And then later I realized that whatever he did was for my good. Yeah. What he did was very good for me, because if he had encouraged me to come down and stay there, then I would maybe have moved down completely. I will not stay up there at all. And that was really good. And so after that, I didn't want to go down. I just wanted to stay in the monastery and study. That was good. And then when I was when I had grown bigger, then I will go to visit my aunts and uncles, but I will not sit. And then they were very nice to me, respectful, because I'm a monk, and they offer food and all these things, and they put me all the way on the top of the row and serve me the first, and all these things. So, but those are not relevant. I didn't become so attached to those things, and then I said, okay, eat, finish, I'm going. He said, no, please stay, talk to us. All these things. I said, no, I have to go back. And then my uncle used to say that, when he was young, we had to chase him all the time. Now we beg him to stay, and he doesn't stay. So anyway, when you leave, and then you become, carried away by other things, and then you forget about that, and that's how you degenerate.
But with your example, just continue for a moment. I mean, you left, but you're still here. So it was sort of finding a new balance.
Oh, that's a totally different story now.
Bring out the projector.
I was curious,
Sure.
what age were you when you decided you wanted to, you saw the value of really staying and focusing? How old were you?
I was, I think, 13 or 14 years old.
When you were kind of okay.
Yeah. So this is where really life is, and when I felt like that. And then until I was, 18, 19 years old, I really studied well and I did very good. And then after that, then I graduated with the regular studies, not with the Buddhist philosophy. Buddhist philosophy is like lifelong study, but with other things like English, Tibetans, and other things. Then I graduated from there, and then I was appointed, to work in the office, in the monastery office. And after that, I was appointed to do translation. And then after some time, then in 1993, that was the first time when I went, left the monastery to go to other countries to translate. Yeah, since then I've been going out all the time. So I went back a little bit, but then, like now I'm not really studying, it's like didn't feel like really fit there, So since then I've been like going out all the time, yeah. So 1993, yeah, that was the first time I went to Hong Kong from Nepal. Anyway, so that's not important thing. So suffering again. Walter, what do you think? Yeah.
I can think of.
So
I'm kind of thinking about this idea of this all-pervasive suffering in me.
yes.
I'm thinking about the way you described it as meditating on it until it becomes an innate belief that you know to be ultimately true. And then I was trying to think about anything in my life that I believe to be ultimately true to the level that you're talking about. And I'm having a hard time coming up with anything. And I just find that an interesting thought.
Mm-hmm. Coming up with anything like what?
That I believe to be as innately true as what you're talking about. Not that it's not possible. What I'm saying is in the context of my own life as it is now.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting to think about what you really know innately, to really knowing that full realization.
Yeah,
that
yeah.
You know it to be entirely true. And I think it's interesting to try to then think, well, what do I believe to be that true?
Well, if you're talking about realization, we have plenty of that. Can somebody think of that? A very, very good realization of something in our mind. Walter?
Look, and I'll eventually die.
I wasn't getting there, but that's a good idea.
We're all eventually going to die.
But do you you know that.
But it's pretty realized as well.
It is real. But most people don't live like it's real.
No, we don't have that realization. We know, that's again, Chris said, that's intellectual.
Right.
Yeah.
I know I'm going to die, but do I really know I'm going to die? No, I don't know.
I think it's in degrees. We all have.
Okay, Karen, you have something?
Something very recent that got deepened is how connected I am to everyone. I know that to be true.
I wasn't talking about that either.
But that's
And people?
No, that one's even higher. That's not in our life.
Like here.
Not in our ordinary life. I don't know if you are an ordinary person or not. I can't say that, but not in ordinary people's life. So what is it's a very good realization in ordinary people's life. I think Wendy knows something.
So love?
Huh?
Love? Everyone defaults to love.
And that's the not the true love.
Well,
You're talking about the true love?
I'm talking about true love.
Okay.
But most people attach love, or love with attachment. I don't know.
The realization.
No, I was thinking of,
food,
sorry.
The food that we need to have food to survive. We all.
That's
pretty
true.
much-
That's true.
yes.
Now I was more thinking about maybe we were not thinking that way. I wouldn't think it that way either. But intellectually, yes, I will agree with this thought that I'm going to say. Is attachment. We have a very, very strong realization of attachment. Ordinary person like me. Anger, jealousy, arrogance. Maybe not that much, but attachment definitely. we have a full realization of attachment. Ordinary person, but I don't know in your life, Chris, but if you're an ordinary person like me, then you do have that.
I guess when I was thinking about it, I wasn't thinking about it in those terms.
In terms of, no, exactly, yeah. Yeah, see, when we talk about realization, when we talked about realization, we're all thinking about the good things like emptiness, love, compassion.
Yeah.
Yeah. Those are the things that we're trying to get familiarized. That's really good. But what we are really familiarized with since beginner's time, since we were born, even like from the time we were born, we're familiarized with attachment, with anger. If somebody pokes you, you get angry easily, That shows how high realization you have. Even if somebody looks at you in a certain way, you become angry easily. Right? That's a really high realization.
I think the confusion that I was having about that is I thought a realization was realizing something that is actually true versus something that's a delusion.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I struggle with is that, at least the concept I have of things like emptiness, from what I can understand, how are the philosophies that are put into Buddhism about love and compassion, how are those things true and absolute, but everything else is not? Like, how do we know that those things are true? Like that desire and connection and that love that will be, the love without attachment, all that.
Mm-hmm.
But how is that like a true, real thing yet? Nothing else, no other interactions
so nothing.
Existences like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's all manifestation of karma and delusion. How do we know that these couple things are actually real and not also just?
So what are the things you are thinking are real? I don't see anything that's real. Intellectually.
Intellectually.
Intellectually, I don't see anything that is true. Intellectually, Of course, I haven't realized that, but intellectually, I don't see anything. What are the things that you are thinking that exist truly? Even emptiness itself doesn't exist truly. Let alone love, compassion, bodhicitta, all these things. Nothing exists truly. If you're thinking in that way,
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
That's how I was thinking.
Yes, nothing. There's nothing that exists truly. Yeah.
So is it that we're choosing?
Even Buddha doesn't exist truly. Even the Bodhisattva Buddha doesn't exist truly. Enlightenment doesn't exist truly.
The Heart Sutra, right?
Huh?
The Heart Sutra, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Everything's empty. So doesn't exist truly. So that's what I'm.
So then does it mean we're just choosing to keep these things real with our minds? That we're choosing the reality that we create, or is it that some of these things do?
The reality. Yeah, when we talk about the true, existing truly, again, how this in Buddhism, when we say existing truly, means existing from its own side. So and again, existing from its own side, which people think is okay, but again, what it means in Buddhism, is existing independently, without depending on anything else. So there isn't anything that exists independently. Everything has to exist on some, depend on something for it to exist.
So then, because of that interdependence, is
Yes.
everything then a product of?
So interdependent is the reality.
The interdependence
It's the reality.
So
Yeah.
because of that, does that mean everything's tainted by delusion, even things that love and compassion and no self and connected to everybody and all the good things that we try to talk about here, is that even tainted by delusion? If it's not, you know what I mean? If it's if these aren't these true things.
Yeah. So no, it's again when it means it's not true, doesn't mean it is bad. Doesn't mean it is not existing. Of course, it's not. So this table is not true, and not truly existing. This table doesn't exist truly, which means it doesn't exist independently. Which means it doesn't exist on it's on its own, which means it doesn't exist independently by itself, because it depends on many things. And it depends on the wood, right? Just the wood doesn't make the table. It depends on the carpenter, right? And all these tools and all these things, so all those things. So it's dependent like that. But when we look at the table, we see a solid table by itself, right? We don't think in that way.
How does something like nirvana
So even if it's permanent, it has to be interdependent. So everything that exists is interdependent. So even if it is permanent, it has to be interdependent. And so interdependence is the permanent. Interdependent is the reality. Interdependence is how it is. That's going to last forever. So the table being interdependent is there all the time, even if the table is not there. Right? So interdependence of the table has to depend on the table or not. Right? So even if the table is not there, the interdependence of the table is still there. So therefore, it is permanent. That one is permanent.
That helps.
Yeah.
It's helping.
Yeah. So that's what emptiness is all. So that reality. That's what the reality is all talking about. And so because interdependent is the reality, so that itself is also empty of inherent existence. So that itself is not independent, and that is also dependent. Everything is dependent. So everything that exists, including emptiness itself, the reality itself. A reality is also not truly existing. So when we talk about reality, then it has to be true, right? I mean,
Right.
in regular language or conversation, we say that true and reality means same. But here, when we say reality is that, and that doesn't exist truly, means that doesn't exist independently on its own. So when we come to realize that, then when we come to realize the interdependence of the table, will not be attached to table. Will not hate the table. Right? So the suffering that comes from hating the table or attaching the table is because of not seeing the reality of the table. So when you see the reality, then you will not have attachment, then you will not have the suffering that comes from attachment. So the root of the suffering is grasping at a table or anything as existing from its own side, independently. So when you realize that, then you cut the root. Then you have no more suffering. Of course, that's far, far away. So we intellectually can talk about that, but in terms of the realization, have to make a lot of effort, maybe for many lifetimes. And if you go to work in the morning, come back in the evening and do some prayers, you're not going to have realization of emptiness. Right? We're not going to have realization of emptiness like that, right? So emptiness, anything, we have to make effort, make time, meditate on it constantly. Familiarize with that. Even if you are working or not, always think about that, and of course it's possible. You can practice Dharma anytime. But if you only practice, a little bit of time of the day, then there's no way we can get realization. Anyway, so coming back to suffering.
You're suffering now.
I know.
No, it's really important, important to understand the suffering. If we don't understand suffering, we will not want to be free from it. If we don't have the wish to be free from it, we will not walk to free from it, right? So, of course, having love, compassion, bodhicitta, the realization of emptiness is so good, but that will not happen if we don't realize suffering, right? And if we don't study Buddhism. So what's Buddhism now? Now I'm going to test your memory.
Desire to be happy and
The realization of suffering.
Realization of suffering. Now I told at the beginning, very simple. What is Buddhism?
Teachings of the Dharma.
Teachings of the Buddha. That's right. Teachings of the Buddha is Buddhism. It's so simple, right? People think, wow, Buddhism is like something like that. Different. It's kind of a religion and some kind of religion, that's very, out of the world and something like that. It's not. It's just teachings of the Buddha. And what is the teachings of the Buddha? Man, I'm going to ask you now.
Okay. I'm still thinking about emptiness.
No, don't go there. Don't go there.
Emptiness.
84,000.
Sorry, what was your question?
What is the teachings of the Buddha?
Teaching of the Buddha.
Maybe Barbara should help her.
The 3 forms of suffering.
Yes.
3 forms of suffering is teachings of the Buddha.
Part of it.
Headaches, Buddha's teaching.
Suffering exists.
That's this.
Right.
But teachings of the Buddha is a method to overcome suffering. It's not the 3 forms of suffering, but the method to overcome the 3 forms of suffering. You can say that. It's a method. It's a path. Method, a path to overcome the suffering. So you know that? You understood that now? Buddhism? What is Buddhism, right? We're all here to study about Buddhism, but we have to know what is Buddhism. Teachings of the Buddha. And teachings of the Buddha are method to overcome suffering. The overcome suffering and cause of suffering. And and a path to achieve liberation and enlightenment. So that's a little bit up there, but in general it's a method. Okay? Any questions?
So going forward, are you ending now or you're not ending now?
Well, if you don't have question, if you don't have question, then we might as well end here. We'll get more,
So
more.
going forward, are we going to have these like open forum discussions about whatever questions we have, so we should just come up with lots of questions?
Definitely.
That's scary.
That's the discussion.
But we can talk more about emptiness. And also, I know this may sound silly, but like, what would be this, okay, you guys can laugh, but what would be a day in the life of a bodhisattva?
Day in the life of
Yeah, like,
Bodhisattva.
like that would be an attainment to be a
You should ask that to Bodhisattva, not me.
Well,
No,
There's
just
a
kidding.
cape. There's a cape involved.
There's
It's
a cape
superhero,
involved,
yes.
I
There's
thought
superhero.
you get caught up in your head, like going,
Yeah.
That's it.
I'll be more clear about that next time.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I got a question.
No, okay,
Oh, you have
let's
a
go,
question?
Scott. Yeah, he was.
So,
And then Scott has more interesting questions.
so I'm confused about.
Because he said the life is suffering, so that's very interesting.
So I'm really curious about how the idea of Pure Lands fits in with Tibetan Buddhism, and when we visualize certain Buddhas, like the Medicine Buddha or Tara, or where they exist, where does that come from? This may be a question for another night, but like, how do those worlds, those places exist, and in what capacity? We're visualizing them, but are they seen as being something of a real existence, or a means to understanding a specific concept within Buddhism? Because I know that there's Pure Land Buddhism, which actually believes in a real land in the West, but my sense is that within Tibetan Buddhism, they are not understood to be literal, but to be figurative, or means to understanding deeper concepts.
Yeah, so there's a difference in the Pure Land, and so there can be a Pure Land that is emanated by the Buddhas, you know, and if you are there, it will just look like this: the place, you know, the house, the hills, mountains, meadows, you know, lakes, and all these things. But the difference is, of course, here there are so many imperfections, right? So, you know, there's so much, you know, trash on the roadside, you know, and the big bumps, you know, here and there, and thorns and pebbles and all these things. But Pure Land is perfect, with no imperfections. Nothing's imperfect, so everything's perfect. The grass is green all the time. You know, here you see, you know, patches of, you know, yellow, and maybe no grass somewhere, and somewhere it's very the bad weeds and all these things. So you don't see that. That's completely perfect. So anyway, so it's a perfect place. So there is such place, and there's such place where you and I can be born also.
So that is part of Tibetan Buddhism. Okay, wonderful.
It's not part of Buddhism. That's the real. There's such place.
Got it.
There's such place, you know, where beings like, you know, ordinary beings, who practice and who create a cause to be born there, can be born there. So you have to create a cause to be born there.
Okay.
You know, so if you have the cause, you can be born there. Well, we created a cause to be born here. You know, like to born in this world, and to be to be in this area, to be in America, to be in Boston, to be in Metro, to be in Kurukulla Center, to be in this particular room in the Kurukulla Center. So all this karma, we've created a cause for that. And so it makes very sense that one school of Buddhism was called mind-only school, says everything is in the nature of mind. So it is all created by mind. So mind says this and it's this. It becomes that, So it's true. It really makes sense, because when you talk about the table, right, it's a concept. Right? There's no table by itself says I'm table. It's me and you, people in general, posited it as a table. And then it becomes table. If it was posited as chair, it would be chair.
What does that word mean?
Posited means like something is called it's called such and such.
Define
As in
such.
deposited. You
Define.
deposit an idea, you deposit
Define.
to put
Yeah.
something.
It's to call such and such. Because this is called table, so therefore it's become table. This is
Convention.
like to call or to posit
Yeah,
it
convention.
as a table.
We have the
So
convention,
when you have
this
that-
is called a table.
Yeah. So it's true. And so this table that I'm using is created by my karma.
Or collective karma, right? Because
Oh.
we all see this table.
Well, no, the one that I'm experiencing, the one that I'm using, the one that you're using
Yeah,
is created by your karma. One I'm using is created by my karma.
okay.
See, I came here and the table was there and I can use it. I can put my hand on it. I can put my cup on it, right? I'm using it. And that is created by my karma.
But I could walk over there and put my cup over there.
Exactly. So then that will be your karma, right?
But it's our table then.
No. So the one that you're using is your karma. One I'm using is my karma. Right? And it goes very broad.
Okay.
It goes broad. The house that you're staying is created by your karma.
Yeah.
The aeroplane that you're flying in is created by your karma. The airport that is created by your karma.
But at the same token, if people are using, don't they have some type of interrelational karma?
Yeah, of course, there's a collective karma. Collective karma.
But you have like.
Right.
Yeah,
Because we're all
collective
sitting
karma.
here.
That's right, exactly. Yeah.
Well,
So-
because everything is interdependent.
Yeah. So
So it's bad to fly with people who have bad karma.
I go on board and check in.
see, if you don't have that karma yourself, even if the plane falls down, you'll not die.
Okay.
Right.
See, you have to have created karma to die in that way. If you haven't created karma, no. So you can't. Somebody's bad karma can't bring you bad thing.
You can only suffer the results of your own karma.
Your own karma, exactly. Somebody's bad karma cannot bring bad thing to you. If you're experiencing bad things, oh, because of this person, I'm going through this. No. You're going through that because of your own karma.
So, since we're on karma, at the moment, if someone has a very difficult life and overcomes those difficulties, let's just say like in a peaceful or thoughtful, I guess enlightenment, I don't know the way to look, then in each moment, are they changing their karma, like for their death?
Mm-hmm.
Like, are you born with the same karma that's going to kill you, or can you change that daily with every choice? Or
So yes, you can change, but you're right. The karma, very karma that brought you here is going to end it also. That's the karma.
So that's the point, in a sense, of this particular.
Exactly. Yeah.
To
Exactly.
overcome, in a sense, not overcome it, but
Well,
solve it, like
mhm.
Realize it.
even feel.
Yes. Well, you can overcome that. You can overcome that karma. Of course, then you have to go through all those practices and things like that. And you can overcome. And then, when you have overcome in this life, you have no karma to die, then you will not die at all. Unless you intentionally kill yourself, you will not die at all. So when you overcome that karma.
How come we don't see that happen more
because nobody's able to do that. In nowadays, yeah. Of course, during Buddha's time, people can do that a lot, and they can stay forever. They say, oh, okay, no point staying here now, I'm going to go, and they just,
Yeah.
Right.
go. But if they stay, they can stay forever, because they have no karma to die anymore. So that doesn't happen by itself, like that. It has to have a cause for it to happen.
Would that be a Buddha or a Bodhisattva who could live like that?
A Buddha,
Or would it be
an Arhat, we call it
Yeah,
Arhat.
Arhat, yeah.
The four destroyers means like
Yeah.
those who have completely overcome their inner foes, inner enemies,
Mhm.
like delusions. So when they have completely overcome that, then they have nothing to kill them.
But being born as a human being, you already have some bad karma right from the start.
Yes,
Otherwise you would
definitely.
be born as a
But
god.
as a human being, you can practice and you
Yes.
can overcome these karmas, right?
Yes, so
karmas
the next
and delusions.
life you will be maybe
Yeah.
born.
And then while you're still alive, if you don't have the karma at all, you have purified all those karma to karma that will bring you death. If that karma is gone, what will bring the death?
I agree, nothing.
Yeah. So
Because there's no cause for that.
that's right, exactly. So you can live forever. You can overcome and then live forever.
So would there likewise be no cause to even have a physical body here? You purify the karma?
Exactly. Yeah.
You could just
Can it,
Yeah. You just poop.
can a god die?
Magically born.
Can
So
a-
that's what we say, the magical birth.
Can a,
More to your question.
can a god die? When you're born as a god, can you die?
Yes, well, again, how do you define? In Buddhism, when we define as a god, because there's the six realm beings, six different kind of beings, hell beings, the hungry ghosts, the animals, the human beings, the demigods and gods. So those are all sentient beings.
So
They are not enlightened or they are not
so
liberated.
we can die as
So you will die.
yes.
Yeah, the life is spent is very, very long. It's infinite lifespan, but eventually they will die.
Who are dakinis?
Those
In
are
which
What
country?
is that word?
Yeah, no, just kidding. Well, again, dakini could be also emanation of the Buddha, of the deity, and there also can be beings, who are dakinis, who go from that level, and reaching certain level, you become dakini. You reaching certain level of your practice, and you become arhat, you become bodhisattva, you become a Buddha, like that. So it's a being, with the realization.
Before something else, or just a different kind of?
Well, usually it is to do with the tantric practice, or the tantra practice. So once you have reached a certain level of tantra practice, then you become dakini. Yeah. So they call it daka. Dakinis means in literally in English it means heroes and heroines. So dakinis are heroines. So heroes are people who call it, oh, he's a hero because he fought in the war, in this First World War or Second World War, like that. So those are heroes, right? So who survive all those wars. So here we're talking about the war with the inner delusions, inner enemies. So those who have killed the inner enemies, those are the real heroes. And so those heroes. Here, heroes in the practice, heroes means who have killed, destroyed the inner delusions, inner enemies. And then the dakinis, is a female, dakas is a male, heroes is male, heroine is a female. So female practitioner who have overcome that is heroine. And the male practitioner who have overcome those inner enemies is heroes.
All the inner enemies?
Well, you can again, how much hero, how big of a hero you are, right? So if you have, so we talk about gross delusions and then the subtle delusions, right? All these things, So so like, attachment itself, is very easy to see as a delusion. Right? The attachment is, oh, bad, that's really bad, But then the imprint left by the attachment, because so you're attached, to the car, right? And you get so attached, that every time you get attachment, you leave imprint in your mind, That's why you overcome that attachment now, because the car is all normal, and the next time when you see another car, you have attachment right away, easily, right? You have attachment easily. Why? Because you have the imprint from the previous attachment. So that leaves imprint in your mind, and that's easily comes up, that attachment. So anyway, so those are the things about the pure realm, is that created by your mind. And so it's created by Buddha's mind. And here we're talking about the Buddha's wisdom, the omniscient mind, the Buddha's wisdom that realizes emptiness directly. That creates the Pure Land.
So when we're
So when you are born there, it is your karma also,
that creates
that creates that. So that's one, one Buddhism, and says that everything is that. But then other one says no, it's not everything that, not everything is not, and it's just thought, but there's also something existing from its own side. You point it there, and then that comes from there. It comes from there, and you point it there also. So they're two together. There has to be a table, and your mind has to, call it table.
Okay.
And then there's a table. If there's no table, and your just mind calls table, there will be no table there.
Right.
So there has to be a table there. But then one says, no, it's completely your mind. Your mind, that's, anything you call, okay, this thing you call table, that's the table, right?
So when we're doing 25, when we're doing the Tara Puja or Medicine Buddha Puja, and we're visualizing that, are we imagining them, and is the puja directed at that realm, or is it directed at the idea of the Tara?
Mostly it's the idea of the Tara.
Okay.
But of course, when you think of the Tara, and then Tara has her own place, the place where she lived, that's called the natural abode. So that's what we'd call the natural abode of Tara, so the actual place where Tara lives. And then you imagine inviting her from there, to your place in the space in front of you, and there then you make all the offerings, prostrations, and then in her presence you do the confessions, and then you rejoice in the virtues of yourself and others, and all this 7-limb practice you do in her presence.
Okay.
So in front of her, and then making prostration to her is more meritorious than just making prostration. So you if you have some kind of deity or Buddha that you have visualized, to which you are making prostration or to making offerings, then that's more meritorious.
Okay.
So that's the whole purpose of making puja.
Okay.
Doing the pujas. Yeah.
That's helpful. So we're basically inviting them from that pure land.
The pure land, yes.
To here, to then prostrate, and then to offer.
Yeah, and then you normally see, maybe if you're familiar with the puja, then at the end, then you see, so okay, now you can go back to your natural abode,
right?
And things like that. So that we call it commitment beings, the wisdom beings, the actual beings, things like that. So the commitment beings is the being that you have visualized. The actual being is the being that came from there,
Okay.
So actually the commitment being is just your visualization. That's not the real one, right? You visualize as somebody here. You visualize Scott here,
Right.
You can visualize Scott here. That's the commitment.
Right.
Commitment being, Scott. And the actual Scott is there. So then you finish, okay, I call Scott and then bring him here. Now you have the commitment being and the actual being here.
Okay.
And then later, so then you separate the at the end of the puja, then the actual being goes back to their natural abode, the commitment being dissolves back into you and things like that. So, that's this practice you do.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
So that's when you do the practice puja, like that. The thing up like that.
You are basically practicing something that another being is coming to benefit you.
Yes. Well, these are, well, not just another being, but enlightened being.
Yeah.
So it's a Buddha.
Being in a better
Yes.
situation than we are.
That's right. But Buddha, it's a fully enlightened being, a Buddha. You make prostration to them, it's more meritorious, than making prostration to ordinary being. Because of their power, because of their compassion, their wisdom, you create more merit.
Okay.
Yeah. And so of course, it's very, good to make prostration to any being. You can make prostration to Walter. It's good, very good, really. No kidding. No, really. Walter saying, yeah, go ahead.
Statue of Walter is.
No, it's really good. It's really good, you know. And if Walter, you know, if he's the ordinary being, then, you know, the merit that you accumulate is very small. But if Walter is a fully enlightened being, then, you know, you create merit so much more.
But is it just merit through the virtue of these Buddhas helping you, or is it the merit that you create in your mind by
Yes.
just practicing the action in your mind?
So
Practicing the desire to be something or have those better qualities.
Yes, that helps. Yeah, that helps more. But of course, their virtue also helps you. Because of their virtue, you know, you create more virtue of what you do. You know, if they are not virtuous that much, if they don't have that much virtue, then, you know, you don't create that much virtue either. Because of their virtue, you create more virtue. But of course, it all depends on you. You know, it's your virtue, which is created by making prostration to them who has more virtue. Yeah, through that you become something better. You know, through that virtue, then you become better. You become better practitioner. You achieve more happiness. You know. It's through that virtue of yours.
So the Pure Land, is where enlightened beings reside. Enlightened beings who come and benefit sentient beings.
Yes, they reside. Yes.
Which I'm glad you brought up the God realms, because I was a little confused there. But God realms are still those
Yes.
gods that they still have delusions because they're trapped in the God realm.
Yes.
Okay. Got
Yeah.
it.
So again, you know, I mean, you know, different religion talks about, you know, gods in different ways, right? So in Buddhism, again, when God is, you know, God means a sentient being also. It's a kind of sentient being, and they are also born there by the power of karma and delusion. But of course, you know, a lot more positive actions, positive, you know, virtues and all these things. But they're still born there, you know, by karma and delusion, and they will eventually die. In Buddhism, right? And then in other religions, they talk about God as a creator and all this. And that's difficult to do. We're not talking about that God, when we're talking about the God that dies in Buddhism. Yeah.
And a deity is not a god.
No. Well, you know, it's just God means something very special, very powerful, right? So that's what we think of, you know. And the deity is also very powerful, very special. So you can say deity is a God in that sense, you know. And but the deity that is God is a deity also, and deity that is a God is also a Buddha, you know.
Yes.
And therefore, that the deity that is God and the God, no regular God, is not same, you know. So they are different. Yeah.
That's helpful too.
Good. All right,
Yeah.
Wendy.
So there are prayers that pray to be reborn in the pure realm, the pure lands, and then there's also teachings that say being born human is the best life because we have enough suffering and yet also enough, so we can practice Dharma. So which is a better rebirth, being born in the pure realm or being born human?
And depends on individuals. I would prefer to be born in Pure Land.
Can we study Dharma in the Pure Land?
Yeah, of course. You know, you have you know, a direct interaction with the Buddha. If you're born in Pure Land, you have a direct interaction with the Buddha.
As well as with sentient beings.
Sentient
correct?
beings.
Because they're doing.
But you don't see suffering. You don't see suffering, and if you don't have that, you know, propensity or imprint, you know, carried in your mind, it's very difficult to do practice up there. Even though you have, you know, like somebody who's having a direct, you know, interaction with Dalai Lama. If that person only, you know, sees happiness and, you know, good life, then he will not practice more. So you think monk who is with Dalai Lama practices more? Logically, right? I don't know. Of course, I don't know nobody. I don't know anybody, you know, closely, you know, who is, you know, a directly, you know, related with Dalai Lama, like a monk, you know. So if he doesn't see much suffering, if he doesn't see much problems, right, he will not practice that much, even if you have a direct interaction with Dalai Lama. But somebody who is far away from the Lama and sees all these sufferings and really realizes that, then that will practice more. So similar with that, you know. So in Pure Land, if you practice, you have the best opportunity. You don't have to. You can meditate forever. You will not have pain in your knees. So here you have to go through the pain. Oh, it's then after 1 hour, you know, you feel like standing up, and you can't meditate on like that, right? So you can't continue to meditate for a long time, but that gives you the understanding of suffering, and then that makes you think, what caused this suffering? Oh, it's the delusion, so I have practice to overcome that delusion. So you think like that, so there's a pros and cons in both, so as a human being, the reason why it's good is because you can experience the suffering, you can go through the suffering. But if you can't stand that, then that's not much helpful. So, and up there, of course, you have. So it depends. So so bodhisattvas who are up there say pray to be born here because they see more sufferings here. So they want to be born here. And so that's because of that. But then for ordinary being like ourselves, it's hard for us to practice here. Because even though we go through all the suffering, it's still very difficult for us to understand this as a suffering.
Once you take the bodhisattva vow, you're going to continuously be born here, because isn't that not the vow to come back to health?
Well, the vow, yes, you're right. That's the vow if you keep the vows purely. So bodhisattva vows is such and such. You have to do this. You have to do this. You have to do this. You should not do that. You should not do that, and you have to follow that. Just having vow doesn't mean you will be born again and again. So once you have to practice that, according to the vows, the promise that you make. Vow means promise, right? And says, I'm going to do this, I'm not going to do that, and all these things. So if you do that correctly, then of course you'll be born here again and again. You make the vow. You keep the vows. You can be born here again and again. But if you don't, then you make all these promises, and then you keep breaking all these promises, then you'll be born in the hell realm. So just by having bodhisattva vow doesn't mean you will be born. You have to keep them purely. All right.
A lot of pressure.
Okay, so keep some cautions for next time.
Excellent.
So we'll stop here. So we'll just do this short dedication here now. Okay. Can you give me that textbook? Thank you. Turn to page 57. At the bottom, prayers of dedication. We'll do that in English, okay? Through this virtue may I swiftly, having gained the state, blessed and every sentient beings, without exception, in the state, precious supreme body mind, may it were unborn arise, and were born never decline, but increase forevermore. So page 43 at the bottom, long life of His Holiness the Lama. In the snow mountain encircle and source of every benefit and joy, may Lord Tenzin Gyatso Cherisi remain in like samsara sand. And then page 49, short long life of Lama Zopa Rinpoche. You who uphold the subduous moral way, who serve as the bountiful stewards all, sustaining, preserving, and spreading Najinat's victorious doctrine, who masterfully accomplishes magnificent prayers honoring the three jewels. Savior of myself and others, your disciples, please live long. Okay, thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
So, group discussion. All right. See you next time.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Everything goes away.
Everything can go away, but I need a couple of strong people for the next 10 minutes.
No, I really do. I gotta take tables upstairs. I know you look at me, I'm giving the light. Anything that's, I'm happy with it. Thank you, Damchoe. Yeah, because we're having the,
Right, yeah.
developed course, so basically, I gotta carry like